The drive home from my cardiologist's appointment takes precisely 22 minutes when the traffic lights on Meridian line up perfectly. I know this because I've made the trip every 3 months for the last 4 years, ever since my doctor discovered the irregular heartbeat and started me on the blood thinner. I know exactly how the afternoon sunlight spreads across the overpass. I know which lane to choose at the intersection of 5th and Hargrove. I know the exact click my turn signal makes when I turn onto Crestwood Lane, the quiet street where my wife and I had lived for 31 years. That Tuesday in October, I nearly missed the note. It was slipped under my windshield wiper, folded once, written in the rushed script people use when they're short on time. I almost pulled it free and threw it away without looking, the same way I handle pizza coupons and lawn care flyers. But something made me pause. Maybe it was the paper. It was ripped from a legal pad, the type my neighbor always kept on his kitchen counter. Maybe it was the ink, heavy and blue, pressed firmly as if it carried weight. Don't go inside. Come to my house first. I have something you need to see. Russell. I sat in my car for a long moment. The engine ticked softly. A mockingbird called sharply from the oak tree near the edge of my driveway. I looked at my front door, the same red one my wife had chosen back in 1993 because she thought it made the house feel inviting. And something tightened in my chest that had nothing to do with my heart issue. I shifted the car into reverse and backed into Russell's driveway next door. He was already waiting for me on his porch before I could even open the door. Russell is 71, a retired postal inspector, and the sort of man who notices details for a living. He wore the expression he gets when trouble is brewing, the same one he had the morning he came over to tell me my back fence had been cut. He didn't greet me. He simply held open his screen door and said, "Come in, sit down." His living room smelled of coffee and the cedar blocks he keeps in his closet. His wife had died 6 years earlier, and he lived alone now, tidy as could be, the way some men become when they've lost the person who once made the clutter feel meaningful. He placed a laptop on the coffee table and turned it toward me. "Before I show you this," he said, "I want you to understand I wasn't spying. I put up that camera after the package thefts on the block last spring. It covers my driveway and part of the street. I had no idea it would record what it did." I told him I understood. I told him to go ahead. He pressed play. The timestamp showed 2 weeks earlier, a Thursday at 11:14 in the morning. I had been at my woodworking class at the community center. I attend every Thursday, have for 2 years. It gives my hands something to do now that I'm retired. The video came from Russell's front camera, angled slightly toward the street, and it captured my driveway clearly. A gray sedan I didn't recognize pulled up and parked at the curb. The driver remained inside. Then my front door opened and my wife stepped out. And behind her came a man I had never seen before, tall, maybe 50, wearing a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. They stood together on my porch and talked for several minutes, standing close the way people do when they're already familiar with each other. Then she handed him something, an envelope. He slipped it into his jacket pocket, touched her elbow lightly, and walked back to the sedan. Russell paused the video. "That wasn't the first time," he said. "That was just the first time I thought to look at the footage." He showed me 3 more clips, 4 visits spread over 6 weeks, always on a Thursday, always while I was at woodworking. I asked him who the man was. "I don't know for sure," Russell said, "but I ran the plate the last time he came." He slid a piece of paper across the table, a name, an address in a subdivision about 12 miles east of us, and a title, Senior Associate at Hartfield and Greer Estate Planning, an estate attorney. I sat with that information for a moment. My wife and I had prepared our wills years ago through a downtown firm we'd used since our 40s. I had not been informed of any updates. I had not signed anything new. I had not been consulted. "There's one more thing," Russell said. He opened a different file on his laptop, not video this time. "My daughter works at the county courthouse in the clerk's office. I asked her to check your name last week because I had a bad feeling and I hoped I was wrong. He turned the screen toward me. It was a filing, a petition. The wording was formal and detached, and it took me a second to grasp what I was seeing, the way you sometimes need to reread something when your mind resists accepting it. My wife had petitioned the court to have me declared legally incapacitated. The petition mentioned my heart condition, my medication, and what it called growing incidents of confusion and unpredictable behavior. It was backed by a signed affidavit. The signature at the bottom belonged to my son. I don't remember driving home that night. I remember sitting in Russell's driveway for a long time. I remember the mockingbird again. I remember thinking about the last time my son and I had sat together comfortably, Thanksgiving 2 years ago, before things grew distant between us, before the phone calls shortened and the visits ended, before he began looking at me the way you look at someone you've been warned not to trust. My son is 34 years old. He works in commercial real estate in Atlanta. He takes after his mother in ways I had always found appealing, the same straightforward manner, the same confidence about things. I had never imagined that confidence could be directed at me. I am 63 years old. I spent 38 years as a structural engineer. I have designed bridges and overpasses and retaining walls in 4 states. I know how to read a load-bearing diagram. I know when something is built to collapse. I drove home. My wife was preparing dinner. The kitchen smelled of the rosemary chicken she cooks every Tuesday. She kissed me on the cheek and asked how my appointment had gone, and I told her the doctor said everything was fine, which was true. I sat at the kitchen table and watched her move around the kitchen with the ease of someone who doesn't realize they've been observed. That night, I slept in my own bed, and I kept my expression unchanged. The next morning, after she left for her book club, I called my attorney, not the estate firm, my attorney, the one who had managed my father's probate, the one who had reviewed the contract when I sold my engineering practice 6 years ago, a woman named Patricia, who I had known for 20 years and trusted more than nearly anyone. She returned my call within the hour. I told her everything. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Don't move any money, don't sign anything, and don't discuss finances with your wife. Can you come in tomorrow?" I could. What Patricia uncovered over the next 10 days was careful and deliberate, and in its own way, almost remarkable. The way a termite colony is almost remarkable before you notice your house has been hollowed out. Our joint brokerage account had been slowly emptied over 14 months. Not all at once, that would have set off warnings. Small transfers, 800 here, 2,000 there, spaced out enough that the statements appeared normal if you weren't totaling them. The total reached just over $240,000. It had been moved into an account I had never seen, in my wife's name only, opened at a bank in another county. The estate attorney from Russell's video, the one my wife had been meeting on Thursdays, had been drafting new paperwork, a revised trust, a power of attorney that, if I were declared incapacitated, would grant my wife complete control over everything we owned. The house, the retirement accounts, the investment portfolio I had built over 30 years. The incapacity petition was the linchpin. Without it, even as my spouse, she couldn't access certain accounts on her own. With it, she could do whatever she wanted, and I would have no legal grounds to object. Patricia explained all of this to me across her conference table, using terms like elder financial abuse and fraud in a straightforward tone that I appreciated because I was struggling to keep myself steady, and I didn't need sympathy at that moment. I needed someone who could think straight because I was having trouble doing so myself. It wasn't the money. I want to be clear about that. It was 31 years. It was the red door. It was every road trip and every disagreement about the thermostat and every Sunday morning we spent on the back porch with coffee, not needing to speak. It was all of that turned into a legal filing meant to strip away everything I had left and give it to a woman who had looked me in the eye every day and felt nothing. And it was my son's signature on that affidavit. That was the part I kept returning to at 2 in the morning when sleep refused to come. What had she told him? What image of me had she constructed in his mind, bit by bit, over however long this had been happening? What had I overlooked? What had I failed to notice? Patricia told me I needed to be strategic. She said we had enough to file a response to the incapacity petition, and that doing so would pause all proceedings while the court looked into it. She said the financial transfers could be criminal. She advised me not to confront my wife yet, because the instant she realized I knew, assets could be shifted and papers could vanish. I went home, and I was kind to my wife for 3 more weeks. I ate the rosemary chicken. I asked about her book club. I told her my heart felt fine. On Russell's suggestion, I also installed 3 new cameras of my own. Small ones, the type you can check from your phone. One aimed at the home office, where my wife kept her personal laptop. One in the hallway near the filing cabinet, one in the garage. I am an engineer. I understand systems. I understand the importance of records. On a Wednesday evening, while I was supposedly watching the game in the living room, my wife sat at her desk and made a phone call. I couldn't hear the words, but the camera captured her opening the filing cabinet, taking out a folder I recognized as our financial papers, and photographing several pages with her phone. Russell's daughter at the courthouse had been quietly watching the incapacity case. She told Russell, who told me, that a hearing date had been scheduled 12 days away. I returned to Patricia. I put everything on the table: the footage from Russell's camera, the transfer records she had already gathered, the new video from my garage camera, the copy of the incapacity petition with my son's signature, the estate attorney's name, and the records of the Thursday meetings. Patricia looked at it all and said, "We're ready." The morning before the hearing, Patricia filed a counter petition. It was 47 pages long and included financial documents, surveillance video, transaction details, and a formal complaint to the state attorney's office alleging elder financial fraud. She also filed a motion to have the incapacity petition examined as potentially fraudulent given the financial situation, and she sent a copy of the counterfiling, along with a personal letter she had written to my son's address in Atlanta. I don't know exactly when my son read it. I know it was sometime that afternoon because at 4:17 p.m., my phone rang and it was him. And the first thing he said was not hello. The first thing he said was, "Dad." He was crying. My son is not a man who cries easily. He got that from me. And the sound of it did something to me I can't fully describe. I sat down on the back porch steps, the ones I had been meaning to refinish for 2 years, and I held the phone and listened. He told me what his mother had said, that I had been forgetting things, that I had grown paranoid and difficult, that I had accused her of things without cause, that the doctors were concerned, that she was only trying to safeguard the family's assets before something happened to me and everything collapsed. She had given him these details gradually, over months, the way you construct an argument, not all at once but steadily, in the gaps between other talks, until the image she wanted him to see became the only one he knew. He had believed her because she was his mother, and because he lived 12 hours away, and because he didn't know what he didn't know. I told him I understood. I told him I wasn't angry with him. I told him both of those things were true, which they were, even though one was harder than the other. He flew in 2 days later. We sat on the back porch with coffee, and I showed him the documentation, not to punish him or make a point, but because he deserved to know the truth. He reviewed the bank records. He watched the footage from Russell's camera, his mother on the porch with the estate attorney, handing over the envelope, the comfortable, familiar way they stood together. He read his own affidavit, the one he had signed based on what she had told him, and his face showed something quiet and painful. "She told me you'd been having episodes," he said. "She said you'd gotten lost driving home from the grocery store." I told him I had never gotten lost. I told him I still knew every light on Meridian. He set the papers down and looked out at the yard and said, "What do you need from me?" I told him I needed him to be willing to provide a statement correcting his affidavit. I told him I needed him to tell the truth. He did. The court proceedings lasted 4 months. I won't describe every session because much of it was procedural and detached, and the sort of thing that explains why people say the legal system isn't made for sorrow. But here is what happened in the end. The incapacity petition was dismissed. The court determined it had been submitted under materially false grounds, supported by testimony that my son himself later withdrew and corrected. The financial fraud investigation, managed by the state attorney's office, led to charges against my wife and the estate attorney. The attorney was disbarred pending the result of his criminal case. My wife pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of financial exploitation of an elderly person, a charge that still feels strange to read because I am not the kind of man who considers himself elderly, and I am certainly not the kind of man who expected to become a victim. The plea included 3 years of probation, significant fines, and a court order requiring the return of all transferred funds. Every dollar was returned. Patricia made certain of that. I signed the divorce papers on a Tuesday in February. It was cold that morning, the kind of gray Ohio cold that makes everything seem slightly unreal. I drove home from Patricia's office and pulled into my driveway and sat for a moment. And across the yard, Russell was outside checking his mailbox. He saw my car and lifted his hand, the way he always does. The same brief wave for 18 years. I waved back. There are things I reflect on now that I didn't have words for while it was happening. I think about how a long marriage can become its own kind of structure, how you stop examining it closely because you assume you already know what's inside. I think about how simple it is to create a false image of someone in another person's mind, especially when that person is distant and loves you and has no reason to doubt what you're saying. I think about how my son and I lost nearly 2 years to a story that wasn't true and how we're constructing something new now. Carefully, the way you build on ground that has been examined. He calls on Sundays. Sometimes we talk for 5 minutes. Sometimes an hour. Last month he drove up and we spent a Saturday refinishing the back porch steps together. And at some point in the afternoon, he looked at the work we had done and said it looked solid. I told him it would hold. Russell and I have coffee on his porch most Friday mornings now. I brought him a bottle of good bourbon at Christmas, and he told me he didn't need gratitude, that he had done what any neighbor would do. I told him most neighbors would have stayed out of it. He thought about that and poured himself a second cup. I still attend woodworking on Thursdays. I am building a bookcase, nothing elaborate, just clean joints and solid oak, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing every connection is exactly where it belongs. My instructor is a woman about my age who lost her husband 3 years ago and who has strong views about wood grain and makes everyone in the class laugh at least once per session. I don't know where things go from here. I am 63 years old and living alone for the first time since I was 29, and some mornings that feels like loss, and some mornings it feels like something different entirely. What I know is this: 31 years of a life is not nothing, even when the ending is what it was. The woodworking is real. The coffee with Russell on Friday mornings is real. My son's voice on Sunday is real. The back porch steps are solid, and the red door, I painted it navy blue in March. A small change, but enough. Thanks for watching my video. Like and subscribe my channel.